Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum viewers. Today our lecture is on Victorian period. Before going to discuss the Victorian period, we will have a recap of our Romantic era. In Romantic era, as all of you know, that it was the period of the production of poetic genre. In the field of poetry, what poet has introduced the most important element in poetry was the Romantic movement. In the Romantic movement, what the first thing he had done was the deviation from classical period. He at first chose one thing that was important to the common man, that is common language. Number two, he completely shunned the town poetry. So in this era, we found out that only the Wordsworth and his friend S.T. Coleridge was the most important pioneer of introducing Romantic period. And we found that this era ended in 1824. Look here, in 1824. In 1824, though this period ended, but the lives of our great poets, for example Wordsworth, S.T. Coleridge and other great poets, had not been ended. Wordsworth, who had born in 1770, was died in 1850. And when we see S.T. Coleridge, we find that he died in 1834, lived until 1850. Though he had spent after 1824 26 years, but we see here that during this 26 years he had never produced a poetic creation, a poetry of such merit that had been considered to be included in Romantic period. And such was the case with S.T. Coleridge as well. His friend S.T. Coleridge, who died in 1834, lived until 1834, and he was born in 1772. What is important to tell in all this discussion was that the deaths of these two persons was not the harbinger of coming up of the arrival of Victorian period. What is most important in Victorian era is the arrival of 1832 Act. When the Act of 1832 promulgated in England, we found that Victorian period started. And in this period, a number of great poets came to the view. For example, Browning, Thackeray, and many other poets. And what is important in 1832 Act was the repealing of corn laws. The corn laws were repealed, and the manufacturers and industrialists came to the fore, and they had been given the franchise. Franchise means the right to vote. So this was the most important thing in the horizon of politics in Victorian period. Victorian period is actually a longer period in English history. We for our convenience, divided into two parts. The first part is called early Victorian period, and the next part is called later Victorian period. But before we move on to these two divisions, we will describe here that until which year Romantic period ended. Romantic period ended in 1820 roughly, and till the year 1832 no literary activity of merit had been produced in English history. And this is the most important thing, as we call this 12 years period as the barren period in English history. Though Victorian period is totally attached to Queen Victoria. She came to the throne in 1837. Queen Victoria came to the throne in 1837, but before her arrival, the horizon was in luminance with the enactment of 1832 Act. Later, we find that in 1867 the second Act was promulgated, and in this promulgation, the second Act, which is also called the Second Act of 1867, it brought new liberty, new things in England. So here we find a number of things, a number of poets, a number of writers, a number of literati came to the fore, and they were totally different from the Romantic period. So the students, so the viewers, so the learners, here is the most important thing for all of you, that Victorian period was completely different. The things which were in vogue in Romantic period was the thing of beauty was a joy forever. Such sort of things were ended, and beauty is truth, truth's beauty ended, and we see that Victorian period with its new trends came to the fore. Another important thing that we see, that the division that had been made in Victorian period is for our just convenience. Otherwise, the two periods, the persons coming into the two periods fall within this only period. The trends they followed, the literature they produced, the poetry they created, all had the tinge of Victorian era. So this is totally with our convenience that we had made it. Let's have something different. The most important thing, what literary item creation has been the sole source of the arrival of Victorian period. On literary horizon, we find Tennyson's poem, Tennyson. Tennyson wrote poems. His poems is the name of his book, is completely the harbinger of Victorian era. It was published in 1832. In the coming year, we find other persons coming into this fold, for example Carlyle, for example Dickens. These two came to the fore, and Dickens produced sketches of the abuzz, sketches by abuzz. Dickens produced sketches by the abuzz. And then we move on to the next. Thackeray came, and after that great giant in English history, Robert Browning, came to the fore. His dramatic lyrics, which was published in 1842, also appeared in Victorian period. And dear students, dear learners, dear viewers, the early Victorian period lasted till 1870, which was started in 1832, although Queen Victoria held the throne in 1837. Thank you very much. We will come with the next lecture and with other characteristics of Victorian period, inshallah, in our next lecture. Thank you. Allah Hafiz. One thing I forgot to say, dear viewers, was that if you have any query, any question regarding the topic, you must drop your questions in the comment box. I shall definitely reply you, respond to your questions at the very earliest. Thank you very much for looking at my lectures and having your comments. Thank you.